This next section is as narrated by Dr. C.H. Kwong. I have had the good fortune of knowing Mother Anandamayi and her beneficent influence for many years. I met her first at the Raipur Ashram in Dehradun while I was on an educational tour through India. I vividly recollect this first darshan of Mother, which has remained a very distinct and definite impression in my mind. It was about 1 p.m. on a day in January 1946, when the manager of the roadways of Dehradun had happened to be a devotee of Mother and very kindly arranged for me to go to the Raipur ashram in his car. On arriving at the ashram gate, I found thousands of men and women gathered around Mother. The hall was packed and I was unable to enter, and therefore stood outside for about 20 minutes or so. It seemed to me that all men and women present were asking Mother to give them something of her grace or blessing without making any effort themselves. It is true, when we begin to seek truth, we need a guru to guide us safely through all sorts of obstacles and difficulties that have to be faced on the spiritual path. The guru's grace is certainly needed by the aspirant. But this does not mean that disciples should sit idly by their guru's side and expect to be pushed into samadhi by some miracle. It is obvious that we have ourselves to walk every step of the spiritual path. God resides within every being. The Purusha in his perfection ever exists. If we practice meditation, we shall see God, just as Mother says. Meditation is the real form of worship, and formal ceremonies are but passing phases. When at 1:30 Mother came out of the hall and stepped into a car, I gave up all hope of meeting her, for I had come without having any acquaintance with her, all alone with my burning heart in search of truth. At that very moment, Mother called me by raising her hand and inviting me to get into the railway station. Mother was kind enough to consent car and sit by her side. We drove straight by traveling to Hardware with her in the same compartment, along with Mr. J.C. Mukherjee, an advocate of the High Court in Allahabad. We three were sitting together undisturbed all the way to Hardware. I utilized every minute of the journey to benefit by putting question after question on Indian philosophy, religion, and systems of yoga. Mr. Mukherjee acted as an interpreter. Mother's replies to my questions gave me great satisfaction. She has had no school education at all, but her knowledge is so profound and wide. Of course, a person who gives spiritual instruction should not have mere book knowledge, but must have first-hand direct spiritual experience. Don't we read in Sri Ramakrishna's sayings that a teacher who undertakes to expound religion from book learning is like a man who undertakes to describe Benares after having seen merely a map of the sacred city? Mother also gave me some advice concerning meditation. When we got down at the Hardware railway station, an old Muslim gentleman came and bowed and prostrated himself before Mother. Mr. Mukherjee remarked, "Chow, just see how this old Muslim gentleman, who is a professor of philosophy at the Allahabad University, puts his head on the ground before Mother. How great Mother is." Mother allowed me to accompany her to the Dharamsala, the pilgrim hut, for some time, and then I had to take leave of her, as my train for Lahore was due at 6 p.m. Before I parted from her, Mother told me again that if I had any spiritual experience, I should write to her. I spontaneously responded by saying, "Will you accept me as your disciple?" She just kept quiet with a smile on her lips. The sun was setting on the western Himalayas when I returned to the station, and Mother strolled to the Ganges. As narrated by Sri P.M. Verma. During the last 5 years, I have had more occasions of Mother's darshan during her visits to Allahabad, although every time I preferred to go to her incognito, in the sense that I did not seek to be introduced to her. I felt she had always known me, and she fully satisfied every test by which I thought I could fathom her depths as the supreme incarnation of the Universal Mother. To illustrate my point with a few specific instances, let me first begin with that fateful day of 30th January 1948, when the news was broadcast through the radio at 8 p.m. of the passing away of the father of the nation. I was at that time sitting in the Mother's camp in the Magmela of Allahabad, along with many other bhaktas awaiting the arrival of the Mother. It was a very unusual feature that evening that kirtan had started in the camp where she gave audience, but she had not come even at the late hour. Somebody said that Mother was taking rest on her return from Juicy. A good number of the bhaktas left after waiting for more than an hour. Those that kept waiting, and I was one of them, were taken aback to receive a rather peremptory direction from some whitecaps who entered the camp to stop the kirtan immediately as the news had come of the Mahatma's passing away. As I left the tent, the idea uppermost in my mind was that Mother had not come that day to give darshan, because she knew about that fatality and might not have approved of the uncalled for instructions of the busybodies. I believe he's referring to Gandhiji's death here. On another evening later in the year 1948, while Mother was staying at Juicy in Sri Prabhu Dutt Brahmachari's ashram, I went there for her darshan at the invitation of certain clients of mine who were also putting up there. I sat for a while at Mother's feet without having anything to say. She put a few casual questions to my clients so as to know where they came from. As at the time of the season the pontoon bridge was being dismantled, I was in a hurry to get back across the bridge before it became dark, so I got up to take leave of her. She directed one of her bhaktas to get some prasad for me. There was a moment's delay and I was getting impatient to leave. She made a sign to get the prasad quickly, not only but twice, as I was hurrying out of her presence. A big laddu sweet was at last handed over to me just as I was on the point of leaving the place, and I carried it with me as if it were a prize won by me for all the trouble I had taken in going as far as Juicy to have Mother's darshan. On returning home, I found my wife suffering from a serious attack of colic and diarrhea. As night advanced, her trouble grew worse and worse, and no medicine seemed to help. At about midnight, I felt there was no hope of saving her life, and so I thought Mother's prasad, which lay in my pocket, might possibly come to my rescue. And with trembling hands and with Ram Nama on my lips, I forced a little bit into my wife's mouth while she was almost sinking. Soon after, I was happy to notice that she had fallen asleep, and that was the end of her malady. About 2 years later, when it was again my good fortune to enjoy Mother's darshan at the house of one of my neighbors, it is not possible for me to describe the effect of the few words that fell from her august lips in dispelling certain doubts that had arisen in my mind. When I found she had not touched the offering of sweets I had brought for her, I protested to her while she was not accepting any of it, and narrated to her how I had found her prasad efficacious in saving my wife's life. She said with her usual smile and the condescension of a goddess that she had already accepted it, and for my satisfaction she took a particle of it and made a show of putting it in her mouth. Whereupon her devotee, that is Didi, remarked that Mataji had not a single grain of food for the last 3 days. During the last Durga Puja celebrated by Mother's bhaktas at Allahabad, I wished I could ask Mother to give me some of her prasad once again. I had kept that wish all to myself, but to my great astonishment, a volunteer bhakta approached to tell me that I should not fail to take Mother's prasad at noon the next day. The next morning, I found another volunteer bhakta coming to tell me that I should like Mother's prasad, as Mother had given an express direction to carry that message to me. But for that reminder, I might not have gone to take the prasad at lunchtime. I had no idea that invitation for prasad really meant an invitation for lunch. So I went to partake of a sumptuous lunch in the company of a host of Mother's bhaktas, and for 3 days I had feelings of such purification of the body as one feels after a bath in the Ganges. As narrated by Sri U.C. Dutt. In the spring of 1969, I went to Rajpur, Dehradun, at an invitation from a training institute and stayed there for a week. From Mata Anandamayee Ashram in Kishanpur, I could gather that Mother had not been at all well recently. She was taking rest at the Ananda Kashi in the lap of the Himalayas, and that place is 30 miles from Hardware on the road from Devaprayag. I did not like to miss the chance of seeing Mother in those surroundings, with the Ganges flowing through the Himalayas. Before leaving the area, I went to Mussoorie to see my relative, Dr. J.K. Dutta, the medical officer at the St. George's College. On the Vasanti Mahastami evening, the 4th of April, Dr. Dutta and I were taking rest in silence on beds side by side, when Dr. Dutta exclaimed suddenly, "What is this? How can this be?" "What is the matter?" said I, and he replied, "Ma appeared with a crown on her head. She stood for a while. Does she wear a crown?" I told him that Ma had been given a crown on her 60th birthday. I inquired if the crown was white. Dr. Dutta said that it was yellow, and I became speechless. Our eyes were turned in the same direction of the room. The doctor was lucky to have Mother's darshan in his bedroom, while I could see only the wall, door, and furniture. Is it because he is more deserving, or was I being drawn to her presence soon? I did not know. But a few days later, I was at Anandakashi on the 1st of April, and it is a beautiful spot with lofty green hillocks ranged in a line like sentinels overlooking the babbling streams of greenish white. Red, white, and pink and yellow flowers are blooming here and there in the gardens, and orchards blossomed and bent. The blue vault of heaven hung overhead as the symbol of the infinite. All the aspects of nature vied with one another to add to the sublimity of the place. Why is it called Anandakashi? It is named Kashi as the Ganga flows northward, and Ananda after the blissful mother Anandamayi. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when the lovely sights greeted me. Along with some known faces, I found there 2 Italian devotees, an old lady and a young stalwart, waiting to bid goodbye to Mother. They were leaving after a stay there of a few days. Mother would come out untimely to see them off. I met the lady and the young man in a porch close to Mother's temple. The young man seemed to take keen interest in yoga. He had a giant figure, and he was jovial by nature and friendly with all, and his eyes sparkled when he saw me. After a word or two, he asked me with which mythological person I should compare him. At once I said, Bhima. He refused to accept the honor of a comparison with our Indian Hercules. He liked to be Ganesha, with a long trunk and a quill pen in his hand, to be a scribe to Vyasa. He desired to be accepted as one of Mother's children. He took my address and told me that I would see him shortly clad in the robe of a wanderer, moving along Indian roads. Mother then came out of her room, sat on the veranda, and by her divine presence showered grace on all of us. She smiled as usual when she saw me, and chatted humorously with the Italian guests. On taking leave, Ganesh was almost in tears. At the after-dusk sitting, which continued until about 9 p.m., including the period of silence, I related to Mother's Dr. Dutta's vision of her at Mussoorie on the Mahastami night. Mother told me that she had been thinking of him on that day. She had been to his Mussoorie house once, many years ago, with Baiji. The doctor's wife had prepared puris and vegetables and such things, and entertained them. In the evening, Mother came down to Rajpur on foot and felt thirsty. I do not remember now whether at that time or not some other occasion when her throat became parched due to excessive thirst, while drinking water could not be procured, and a devotee in Bengal offered watermelon to Mother as bhoga. Consequently, her thirst was appeased, and the fact of the offering was duly verified by Baiji. Mother thought of the doctor, and that thought took shape and appeared before him. Thinking and being became identical, but how to explain the crown? On that very day, I was told a lady devotee had placed a mukut, a crown of yellow flowers, on Mother's head. So the vision of wearing a yellow crown. Captain Amal Roy was with us. He is a disciple of Bholanath. At one meeting, he had a vivid description of how Mother saved his life in the battlefield of Kashmir when bombs and shells were dropped by the Pakistanis. The charms of moonlit night and the heaven on earth combined with a sense of duty to help the sufferers, and they dragged the doctor almost unconsciously out of his safe shelter to the danger zone. Having realized his position in the valley of death, he was going to take cover at one point when a sweet and distinct voice was heard within, saying, "Do not sit here." He knew the voice and responded to the call. He then sat down behind a boulder a few steps away. At that moment, a bomb fell and burst where he had intended to sit at first. As a result, a vacuum was created and he could not breathe for a while. However, he was saved, and was a narrow escape through Mother's grace.